August 1971. Stanford University. A group of 24 men are selected for a psychology study. They are screened carefully. No criminal history. No psychological disorders. Stable, normal, ordinary. They are randomly divided into two groups. Half of them become prisoners, the other half become guards. The experiment is scheduled to last 2 weeks. It lasts 6 days. On day 6, Philip Zimbardo shuts it down, not because nothing happened, because too much happened, because the guards had become something that normal people are not supposed to become, and the prisoners had become something that free men are not supposed to accept. In 6 days, starting from nothing, starting from randomly assigned roles, starting from ordinary people. This is the story of what happened inside that basement. And more importantly, it is the story of what it tells us about ourselves. Because the most disturbing finding of the Stanford prison experiment was not what those specific people did. It was the implication for all people, for you, for me, for anyone who has ever looked at atrocities in history and thought, I would never do that. That thought is the most dangerous thought a person can have. Let's go back to the beginning. The year is 1971. America is at war in Vietnam. Images of prisoner abuse are appearing in the news. Philip Zimbardo, a psychology professor at Stanford, wants to understand something fundamental. When people do terrible things to other people, is it because of who they are, or is it because of where they are? Is evil a quality of certain individuals, or is it a quality of certain situations? This question had been asked before, most famously by Hannah Arendt observing the trial of Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann in 1961. Eichmann was not a monster. He was ordinary, bureaucratic. He organized the transportation of millions of people to death camps, the way an administrator organizes a filing system. Arendt called it the banality of evil. Evil that does not look like evil. Evil that looks like a man doing his job. Zimbardo wanted to test whether that banality could be reproduced in a laboratory, whether ordinary people, given a role and a uniform and an authority structure, would become capable of things they would otherwise find unthinkable. The answer was yes. And it came faster than anyone expected. Day 1 of the Stanford prison experiment is almost light-hearted. The guards feel awkward in their uniforms. The prisoners joke around. Everyone knows this is just a study. Everyone knows they can leave. Everyone knows none of this is real. By day 2, something has shifted. The prisoners stage a rebellion. They barricade their cell doors. They shout at the guards. They tear off their prisoner numbers. The guards respond. Not with confusion, not with requests to calm down, with punishment, with psychological pressure, with tactics none of them had been taught and none of them had planned. They confiscated the prisoners' mattresses. They forced them to do push-ups. They used the good cells and bad cells to create a system of favoritism and punishment. They made prisoners refer to each other by number rather than name. They woke them in the middle of the night for pointless counts. They began to enjoy it. Subscribe to the channel, because what happens next is the part nobody talks about. Within 36 hours of the experiment beginning, one of the prisoners has a breakdown. He is screaming, crying uncontrollably, showing signs of acute psychological distress. He is not acting. Zimbardo and his team watch through the cameras. They discuss whether to release him. They decide to wait and see. They wait. A psychologist who comes to interview the prisoners later describes what she sees as a prison, not a study, a prison. She is disturbed. She confronts Zimbardo. She asks how he can allow this to continue. Zimbardo, the researcher, who is supposed to be observing the situation from the outside, has become the prison superintendent. He is not observing the experiment. He is inside it. He is defending it. He has been captured by the situation he created. This is one of the most important details of the Stanford prison experiment, and it is one of the least discussed. It was not only the guards who were transformed by the roles they were given, it was the researchers, it was Zimbardo himself. The situation did not only corrupt the people assigned to have power, it corrupted the people watching the people with power. It corrupted the entire system. By day 3, the guards have developed individual styles of cruelty. Some are aggressive and confrontational. Some are subtler, more psychological. One guard in particular becomes notorious among the prisoners. They call him John Wayne. He invents humiliations. He creates rituals of degradation. He seems to genuinely enjoy the power. After the experiment ends, he is interviewed. He describes how he constructed the persona deliberately. He had watched the film Cool Hand Luke before the experiment. He modeled his behavior on the sadistic prison guard in the film. He gave himself permission to become a character, and the character took over. This is crucial. He did not become cruel because he was cruel. He became cruel because the situation gave him a role, and the role gave him permission. Permission is everything. Once a person believes they are permitted to do something, the internal barriers that would otherwise prevent it begin to dissolve. The uniform says, "You are a guard." The authority structure says guards control prisoners. The situation says control requires enforcement. The enforcement requires pressure. The pressure requires methods. And the methods are whatever works. Nobody told the guards to humiliate the prisoners. Nobody instructed them to wake them at night. Nobody designed the psychological tortures they invented. They invented them because the role gave them permission to invent them, because the situation made invention feel necessary. Because once you are inside a powerful enough situation, your values, your ethics, your sense of self begin to bend to accommodate it. Day 4. A rumor spreads among the prisoners that one of them is planning an escape. The guards respond by creating an informer system. They offer better treatment to prisoners who report on other prisoners. Several prisoners comply. They are not cowards. They are not weak people. They are people responding rationally to the incentives of the situation. In 4 days, an ordinary group of university students has reproduced the social dynamics of an actual prison: collaborators and resistors, informers and holdouts, punishments and rewards, authority and submission. None of it planned, all of it emergent, all of it arising naturally from 2 things: a role and permission. Day 5. Zimbardo allows a prison chaplain to visit. The chaplain interviews the prisoners. He reports back that the prisoners seem to have forgotten they can leave. They have begun to think and behave like actual prisoners. When he asks them what they plan to do about their situation, they talk about parole boards, about good behavior, about earning release. They do not say, "I will just leave." Because inside the situation, leaving does not feel like an option anymore, even though it always was, even though the door was never actually locked, even though at any moment they could have stood up and walked out. The situation had become their reality, and in that reality, the rules of the situation applied. This is the mechanism. This is the thing that makes Zimbardo's work so important and so disturbing. Human beings are not primarily driven by their internal values and character. Human beings are primarily driven by the situation they find themselves in. This does not mean character does not matter. It means that in sufficiently powerful situations, character is not enough. The Stanford prison experiment ended on day 6. Zimbardo's girlfriend at the time, Christina Maslach, visited the facility to conduct interviews. She watched the guards marching the prisoners with bags over their heads. She watched the degradation and the submission and the entire constructed reality of the basement prison. And she said, "What you are doing to these people is terrible." And Zimbardo listened. Of all the people who had observed the experiment over 6 days, she was the only one who objected. Everyone else had been absorbed into the situation. The experimenters, the guards, the prisoners, the observers. Only someone from completely outside the system could see it clearly. Only someone who had not been gradually acclimated to the escalating cruelty could recognize it as cruelty. This is a phenomenon called escalating commitment. When cruelty arrives gradually, when each step is only slightly worse than the last, the people inside the system adapt, they normalize, they find reasons why this step is acceptable. By the time the situation is genuinely terrible, it does not feel genuinely terrible to the people inside it, because they have moved there one small step at a time. Zimbardo called this the Lucifer effect, the transformation of good people into perpetrators of evil, named after the most famous fall from grace in Western tradition. Lucifer was not created evil, he was created good. The fall was a transformation, and the transformation was not an anomaly. The transformation is what situations do to people, given enough time, given enough pressure, given enough permission. Now here is where the story gets more complicated and more important, because the Stanford prison experiment is not the only evidence for this. It is not even the most disturbing evidence. In 1963, Yale psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted a series of experiments that would become the most replicated and most troubling findings in the history of social psychology. Milgram told volunteers they were participating in a study on learning and memory. Each volunteer was assigned the role of teacher. A learner was strapped into a chair in another room. The teacher was instructed to ask the learner questions. Each time the learner gave a wrong answer, the teacher was instructed to deliver an electric shock. Each wrong answer increased the voltage. The shocks were labeled slight shock, moderate shock, strong shock, very strong shock, intense shock, extreme intensity shock, danger, severe shock. And at the far end of the dial, 2 final settings marked only with the letters X, X, X. The learner was an actor. The shocks were not real, but the teacher did not know that. The teacher believed they were delivering real electric shocks to a real person. Before the experiment, Milgram asked a group of psychiatrists to predict the results. They predicted that approximately 1% of participants would continue to the maximum voltage, 1%. The sadists, the outliers, the abnormal ones. The actual result was 65%. 65% of ordinary people, when instructed by an authority figure to continue, delivered what they believed to be the maximum voltage to another person, not because they wanted to. Most of them were visibly distressed. They sweated, they trembled. They asked whether they should continue, and when the authority said, Please continue. The experiment requires that you continue. They continued. 65%, not 1%, not the sadists and the outliers. 65% of ordinary people, of people like you, of people like me. This was not a one-time finding. Milgram conducted the experiment in different countries, in different contexts, with different authority figures. The results were consistent. Between 60 and 85% of people would comply with authority instructions to harm another person, even when that harm was clearly causing distress, even when the person was explicitly asking them to stop, even when their own conscience was screaming at them that what they were doing was wrong. The authority was enough, the situation was enough, the role was enough. Now, combine Milgram with Zimbardo. The guards in the Stanford prison experiment had been given authority. The authority gave them permission. The permission enabled cruelty. The cruelty escalated gradually. The escalation was normalized. And by day 5, ordinary people were doing things that ordinary people are not supposed to do. Not because they were broken, not because they were evil, because they were human, because humans are situational creatures, because the most powerful force in human behavior is not character, it is context. Here is the part that most people skip, because it is the uncomfortable part, the part that requires something of you rather than just informing you. Because knowing about the Stanford prison experiment and the Milgram studies is easy. Thinking about what they mean for you is not. Every person who has ever committed an atrocity was once an ordinary person. Every genocide in human history was carried out by ordinary people, people who woke up in the morning, who had families, who had things they cared about, who had, in another context, ordinary decency. The situation changed them, or more precisely, the situation revealed the capacity that was always there, the capacity that is in all of us, the capacity to harm, to comply, to look away, to find reasons, to normalize, to take one more small step. This is not a comfortable thought. It is not supposed to be. The entire purpose of studying the Lucifer effect is not to excuse human evil. It is to understand it well enough to prevent it. And prevention requires honesty. It requires acknowledging that the guards in that basement were not a different kind of human. They were the same kind of human. The situation was different. Zimbardo spent the decades after his experiment working on what he called the heroic imagination, the idea that just as ordinary people can be transformed into perpetrators by powerful situation, they can also be transformed into heroes, into resistors, into the person who says no, into Christina Maslach, standing outside the system and seeing it clearly. But the heroic imagination requires preparation. It requires thinking in advance about what you would do in a situation of pressure, of authority, of gradual escalation. Most people never think about this. They assume they would be the exception. They assume their values are strong enough. They assume they would know if they were inside a situation like the Stanford prison experiment. The evidence suggests they would not. The evidence suggests that by the time you know you are inside such a situation, you are already partially captured by it. The escalation is gradual, the normalization is invisible, the permission is implicit, and the role has already started to become real. So what do you do with this? You cannot opt out of situations. You cannot avoid authority structures. You cannot live outside the social and institutional systems that create the conditions for the Lucifer effect. But you can do something. You can learn to recognize the markers, the slow escalation, the language that dehumanizes, the authority that requires compliance without question, the system that punishes those who object, the gradual movement from step to acceptable step to slightly worse step. These are the conditions. They do not always produce atrocity, but atrocity does not happen without them. You can also practice the thing that Christina Maslach demonstrated, the willingness to see a situation from outside the system, to step back, to ask not whether what you are doing is permitted, but whether it is right, not whether the authority has sanctioned it, but whether you, looking at it from outside the situation, would recognize it as decent. This is harder than it sounds, because situations are powerful, because roles are powerful, because the authority of the system is powerful, and because the voice inside you that says this is just how things work here is the most dangerous voice of all. It is the voice that normalized the guards. It is the voice that kept 65% of Milgram's participants pressing the button. It is the voice that carried out every atrocity in human history while believing it was doing what was necessary. Philip Zimbardo was asked in an interview what he would say to people who watched the Stanford prison experiment and said they would never have behaved that way. He said, "That is exactly what the guards said before the experiment began. Think about that. Really think about it. Not as an intellectual exercise, as a genuine question about yourself. What situation could transform you? What authority could capture you? What gradual escalation would you not notice until it was too late? Where are the situations in your life right now that have characteristics of the Stanford basement? Where are you playing a role that has started to feel more real than you? Where are you taking small steps that are each individually justifiable, but that, viewed from outside, form a direction you would not have chosen consciously? These are not comfortable questions, they are necessary ones.